All right. Thank you, Nate. All right. Good morning. All right. So today is Passover. Today is Passover, and that's what we're going to be talking about this morning. And maybe you're not quite familiar with the term Passover, but there's a lot of tradition with that. If you've been around church, if you've been in church most of your life, you've probably heard of at least this story several times, or maybe you have friends that are Christians, and this is your first time attending church, and you're like, oh yeah, I've heard of Passover before. Maybe you've heard the word Christian vaguely mentioned sometime in conversation. You may still know that this time of year is kind of a big deal for our faith. You got Passover, Good Friday, you've got Easter. All this is a big deal, okay? And so we'll be celebrating, obviously, Easter next week. We got Passover this week, and then last week we talked about the triumphal entry. So we're just really unpacking all of this. And so Passover, as you can see, we already have us a nice little setup back here. We'll get to that here in a little bit. But Passover eventually becomes what we know of it today as the Lord's Supper or communion. Jesus takes it and reframes it into something else than what it was actually traditionally used to be. So before we actually get into this, specifically this one, I want us to just kind of think about just Jewish festivals as a whole, because they were very significant to the Israelites. It was a big deal for them. They were festivals, they were celebrations, they were parties. But they were more than parties. There was more than just getting together and having a good time. There were significant things that each one represented. I'm not going to list them all out and everything, but each one had its own historical significance. And the entire point of it was for them to remember something that God had done in the past. That was the whole point. They would get together. It'd be family and friends and neighbors, and they would eat and they would drink and they would stay up all night and just whatever they used to do, right? But that was the whole point, was to remember what God had done. And each one, like I said, had its own significance for that. We don't necessarily have anything like in modern culture that frames this, but let me try this for a second. So, Sarah and I and our family, we really like live theater. That's something we really enjoy to go see. I say that. I guess I really haven't been to too many live theaters, but every time I go, I really enjoy it, right? Sarah got to go to the Fox last year. I know you really enjoyed that, so it's something that we really like. And this year our kids are all like, hey, let's go see David at Sights and Sound. They really enjoy going down there. It's a really great production, really well done. The rest of the pecans really help as well. But it's all really great. But there's something very specific about live theater that can really bring you in. Okay? I don't want to step on any people that are really big into theater. I'll like their toes. So I know Carrie's back there. So just give me a little grace here. But I feel like the purpose of live theater can really be broken down into two main things. And that is to tell a story and help you experience a story. It's both, right? So for example, I could stand up here, open a book, and read you a story. I am telling you a story. But that's very different than me putting on a costume, putting on a funny hat, and speaking in a different accent and running around the stage, right? And having a props and everything, right? You get the difference, right? So the live theater does more than just tells a story. It brings you in to the experience of what's happening. And in a way, that's kind of the space that Jewish festivals kind of stepped into, right? So it was more than just telling a story. It was more than just celebrating. Take the Festival of Booths or Tabernacle, for example. The father didn't just sit at the table and read the story. No, they went out and built tents or booths, and they lived in them, drank in them, slept in them, all that for a whole week. So all of a sudden, this isn't just some story. I'm living it. I'm in it. Right? And movies can kind of get there for sure, right? But there's something about that live theater aspect that brings you in. It's this isn't just happening figuratively, right? I'm in it. It's happening with me. And the same thing would happen with the festivals. It's happening with me. I'm part of the story. Moses wasn't just escaping the Egyptians. I'm escaping the Egyptians. And that's kind of the space that the festivals would come into. And these would be annual, right? So they would happen the same time every year. Passover, for example, was the beginning of what they would call their religious calendar, okay? That happened the same time every year. every year, every year. And again, like we don't really have a space for this in modern culture. Like we have like annual holidays, for example, right? For sure. We have, 4th of July, we have stuff like that. But for the most part, even our holidays are relatively selfish, right? I mean, they either point back to you, back to someone that did something really cool, or your country. Like, none of them necessarily point back to God wholly. Like, we have Easter and Christmas, but even those sometimes get a little wishy-washy, right? Talk to me about the Easter Bunny later. So just, like sometimes, right, we still don't even have necessarily a frame for this. And the whole point of these festivals and these quote-unquote parties, right, is to create a pattern that the Israelites could follow. It was something that was ingrained into their lives to always point them back to God. We don't have that. We don't have that thing that we do all the time, every year or every day that points us back to God. And that's what this did. It created a pattern. It created a ritual for them. It created a rhythm for life. And the truth of the matter is, like, we move fast, right? Our culture is fast. 1 Thessalonians 5 tells us, be thankful in all circumstances. It's like, well, how can you possibly be thankful in all circumstances whenever you're not even in the circumstance you're in right now? You're already on to the next one. Like, you're not taking even the time to realize where you are. It's fast. On to the next thing. On to the next thing, on to the next thing. And usually the next thing involves only you. Maybe your family. But we move so fast, it's hard to ingrain God into anything that we're doing. And that's just reality, right? That's just how we operate. It's just how it happens. It's like, so what if there was a pattern or a rhythm that we're supposed to have in life? What if that's something that we're actually supposed to have? I'm not big on chaos. I'm not a big chaos person. Jaden, I'm going to borrow this. I don't know where you are. Oh, it's already on. He was way ahead of me. All right. So I'm not big on chaos. Really not. I don't know if you've ever seen the Lego movie, the first one, the better one. So I'm the dad that glue all the Legos together, right? So they don't move. Like, I'm the villain in that movie, 100%. David's probably the pirate guy, if I had to guess. I don't know. But but no, I'm the villain in that movie. Like, I don't like chaos because there's something about everything that you can count on, right? A pattern, a ritual, a rhythm that just brings peace. And you intuitively get this, right? So if I go... Like, you have no idea why. Even if you're not musical, you're kind of going like, stop, don't do that. Like, knock that off, right? Even if you have no idea what rhythm is, you understand that's not it. Right? Like, you can understand, like, this is not how you do the things, right? Yeah, thank you. I'll be here all week. You understand that. Like, okay, we can stop that. That's annoying. That's annoying even me, all right? So, even if you don't understand music, you don't understand things like that, you understand that that's not how that's supposed to be, right? So if we are going through life and there is not a rhythm and there is not a pattern and there is not a ritual to the way that we're doing things, and all of a sudden maybe we're pretty high in anxiety, we got a lot of stress going on, like maybe it's because we're kind of leaning on ourselves. Because who controls the pattern of your life? Who would tell you if you're going too fast? Who would tell you if you're going too slow? Well, the answer would be Tom Fick. No, drums, right? So, but there has to be some objective way of knowing. Give me sound one more time. Right? There has to be something that keeps you on beat. Right? How do you know what that is? How do you know what that is? Well, it can't come from you. There has to be some objective pattern, some objective tempo outside of you. Like I said, and that's what these festivals did for them. It kept the Jewish people, kept the Israelites on a pattern, on a rhythm that constantly reminded them of God. They did it so often to where eventually it maybe even became familiar. know that one? What is it? Yeah. Everyone, like, it becomes a familiar tune. Or you can just kind of go. Right? Something that sounds right. Something that sounds like, that's how it's supposed to be. Okay, I'm done. We can turn it off now. And say, thank you. I used to play that thing, to be honest. So, but this is what the pattern, the rituals, the rhythm, that's what it's supposed to do. It points you back and it keeps you on track. And that's what God was trying to do. He was trying to show them that there's a reason for everything. In ancient Jewish culture, these are the things that kept them in the presence of God. Obviously, we have different ways of doing it now, but this was their thing. Specifically, the Passover, the meal that we see behind us, this particular festival was to highlight the event of the Israelites being redeemed and rescued out of Egypt, right? They were rescued and redeemed out of Egypt, but before that happened, Moses had to get them out. How did he get them out? Yes, God. Okay, sure. But what did God do through Moses to the Egyptians? Plagues. Who can name plagues? Let's see how many we can name. Frogs. Flies. What? Flood. Darkness. Say that one. Death of the firstborn. That's the fun one. But it's also, I know that was really dark, I'm sorry. It's the fun one because it's what we're talking about today, okay? Don't make it weird, okay? So, all right. So the death of the firstborn was the entire point of the Passover because it was aptly named that was the time when the spirit of death passed over the Israelite children and only killed the Egyptian children. And how'd they do that? Well, they would slaughter a lamb, right? Take the blood, they'd paint it on the door, and then the spirit of death apparently was allergic to blood or something and would keep going. But it would symbolize that, and they would move on, right? So that's Passover. It is them celebrating what God did through that. That's the whole point. So a lot of that can be found back in Exodus, but we're actually going to start in Luke 22. Because we're going to talk today mostly about how Jesus takes the festival of the Passover, understanding that whenever they took of this meal, that's what they were thinking about. They were thinking about the spirit of death passing over and moving on from the Israelite children, rescuing them from death. Right? But we're going to talk about how Jesus reframes this whole thing in Luke 22 into what we know of today. Let's go and read. We're going to start in verse 7. I'm going to read through verse 13 right now. I think we have a slide for that. Boom. Then came the day of unleavened bread, on which the Passover lamb had to be sacrificed. So Jesus sent Peter and John, saying, "Go and prepare the Passover for us, that we may eat it." They said to him, "Where will you have us prepare it?" He said to them, "Behold, when you have entered the city, a man carrying a jar of water will meet you. Follow him into the house that he enters, and tell the master of the house, 'The teacher says to you, where is the guest room, where I may eat the Passover with my disciples? And he will show you a large upper room furnished. Prepare it there.' And they went and found it just as he had told them, and they prepared the Passover." It's such an interesting start to this story. So let's go back just a little bit here. And they said to him, "Where will you have us prepared it?" He said, "Behold, when you have entered the city," what city? Jerusalem. We're in Jerusalem because this is a pilgrimage festival. They had to travel to Jerusalem to celebrate it. And he said, "Behold, when you have entered the city, a man carrying a jar of water will meet you." Picture this for a second. So let's actually start last week. Jesus tells his disciples what? Go and find a colt, right? Go and find this random colt with this random guy and just tell them the teacher needs it, right? So they go, they do it, they grab the colt, they take it back to Jesus. And here we are again. Jesus says, "Go into the city and find this random guy carrying a water jar." And it's just so interesting how Jesus has prepared all of this. He's prepared the colt. He's prepared this random guy with the water jar. He's prepared this whole thing all the way, like his entire ministry, all the way to end in Jerusalem during the Passover so that way he can directly connect it to his upcoming death. All of it prepared, all of it pre-planned. And I don't know if you've ever been in a downtown hustle bustle type city like New York or something like that. I haven't, but been downtown St. Louis, which I assume is close. But so whenever you get in downtown and it's the busiest time and there's just people everywhere and everything like that, double that, because this being Passover, there's a ton of people that have now traveled to Jerusalem. So the population is way up there, and they're supposed to just go into the town and find this random guy with a water jar. That'd be like us going into, like I said, downtown St. Louis in the busiest time and Jesus saying, find the guy with the hat. Right? So it's just how are they supposed to do this? And I love this. He goes, water will meet you. He will meet you. There's a backstory here we don't know, obviously, but it's so interesting how they walk in and the guy with the jar is actually going to meet them. It's just so interesting how Jesus has prepared all of this. Ready for this. It's just so amazing. So they get up and they prepare for the Passover meal, as we see before. We had Peter and John in here earlier this week preparing this for us. We really appreciate that. I asked Vicki which one she was earlier, and she didn't care. But thank you, Vicki. Thank you, Deborah. Really appreciate you coming here and making this all pretty. It looks very nice. So they came in and they sat at the table. Is that what they did? No, verse 14 says they reclined at the table. If you notice, the table is very low. It's on the ground. I don't know if you remember the painting of the Da Vinci painted, right, of the Last Supper. Yeah, get that trash out of your head. That's not true. That's not right. That's not how that works, okay? And that is Da Vinci, not DiCaprio. I did make that mistake earlier, and it was really embarrassing. So, but anyways, he painted it. I don't know what he was thinking, but that's not how it looked. It was like this. The table's on the ground, and you recline at the table. So we have some things that we can recline with. We'll be ready to go. We are going to do, we'll call it a condensed Passover meal. So in order to do that, I'm going to need a couple volunteers. Who would like to come up and take part in the Passover meal with me? Emily, I see your hand. Why don't you come on up? Who else? Let's see. All right, come on up. All right, let's give it up for our volunteers. They have no idea what they're getting themselves into. Unless you've read the Bible, then you might. But how's it going? Good. Welcome to my table. Welcome to my table. I'll be gentle. There you go. All right, have a seat. Nate, I'm going to move your guitar back just in case. Oh, sit right here. Wherever you're comfortable. I don't know if it really matters. It might matter. All right. Are we good? Are you comfortable? Yep. For now? Okay. All right. So I do feel kind of bad. I will say that. They did such a wonderful job of setting up this lovely meal for us, and it looks so lovely. They're very, very Middle Eastern, right? And then I went and messed it up and went totally like Brumley, Missouri family barbecue with the styrofoam. So I apologize for that. But it'll all be good. It'll all work out. Okay. And you guys get to be up here and see my notes, see a little behind the stage action or behind the curtain action. It'd be great. Do what? You can tell, you want to do it? Okay. All right, so we would sit and we would have the Passover meal, okay? And then let's go ahead and we want to make sure that we have our wine, okay? This is very healthy wine. It's full of antioxidants, so we should be good and healthy. Thank you for my wife for picking that out for us. She's always concerned. So we'll use the wine glass. It's okay. Yeah, perfect. Nicely done. Try not to get it on the carpet. Make some people real nervous. All right. It's okay, you can throw it. No, kidding.
Just don't throw it back.
Yeah, just don't throw it back. That's the big deal. All right. Okay, we'll lean over. There we go. All right. So we have all of our elements here ready to go. So we have our bread, we have our lettuce, which is called the kapas. We'll get there in a little bit. We got salt water, and I felt really weird to have meat just sitting out. So like I said, we're going like super hick here, and it'll be great. So you and I both got burgers, which is great. You got hot dogs, but I gave you 2, so that way you didn't feel like weird about things, and they are kosher. Just so that's to make sure that's clear. Oh, you can even drill it for you, yeah. All right. Okay, so we would usually start the Passover meal. I'm really trying to make things nice here. We'd really start the Passover meal with first a drink of our wine. Most people call this the toast, right? You would toast your meal. This is not what it would be. It'd be actually called the blessing. Actually, quick thing. Does anyone know why you call it a toast? Toast and punch bowls. Do you know why? You remember? So whenever they would do it, the punch bowl was one. The other one was back in, it started in ancient Rome when they would use olive oil to protect the wine. So they pour olive oil on the wine and eventually it would separate, right? So then whenever you'd pour the wine into the glass, it would then separate in your glass and you'd have a layer of olive oil on top. So then you would take your bread or your toast, you would dip it in the wine to get the oil out and eat it. And that's why you would always do that first before you drink your wine. There you go. That wasn't in the script. You get that for free. Congratulations. Yeah, you're welcome. All right, so they would say the blessing. Let's go ahead and put the blessing up. I'd like us all to say it together. We got that? There we go. All right. Everybody together. Ready? May you be blessed, Lord our God, King of the world, who created these of the wine. Created the voodoo wine. Sorry. Now, this is broken up into 4 parts, so go sparingly. There we go. All right. And that would kick us off. So let's go ahead and read. Like I said, you guys get to see behind the curtain here. In verse 15, Luke 22, verse 15. So let's keep reading this. And he said to them, I have earnestly desired to eat this Passover meal with you before I suffer. For I tell you, I will not eat it until it is fulfilled in the kingdom of God. And he took a cup, and when he had given thanks, which is what we just did, take this and divide it amongst yourselves, for I tell you that from now on I will not drink of the fruit of the vine until the kingdom of God comes. So after the first blessing, and he would say that, the 2 disciples, or not 2, there would be more than 2 disciples, but sitting around would get really confused. Because they're like, that's not how you start this. That's not what this is supposed to be. Because Jesus is talking about something that is to be fulfilled, something that's coming. And Passover is about something that happened in the past, right? So the disciples are looking at him like, you're nuts, man. Like, that's not what this means. But Jesus is trying to start out this whole thing by reframing their thinking. Not only is he talking about something that's happening in the future, but what else is he talking about? He's talking about himself, right? He's saying that this is something that I'm able to do. This is something, it's all about me. You need to understand that what we're getting ready to do, what we're going to partake in, I'm changing it to where it's no longer about that, but it's about me, right? So he's already reframing it. He's already making them a little like, I don't know what's going on. So after they would do the first blessing, and obviously at this point they were really confused, they would dip the karpas. Now the karpas is usually a green leafy lettuce, or a green leafy something, right? They could use parsley, everything like that. I had romaine lettuce in my fridge, so that's what we're using. And I think it serves the point. So, like I said, anything green, leafy, like that, that's usually what they would use. We had lettuce, and usually what would happen is someone would be prompted to ask, why do we dip the karpas? So someone would be prompted to ask,
why do we dip the karpas?
I'm so happy you asked that question. So, dipping of the karpas, the oldest known tradition, the oldest known version of this had to actually do with Joseph. Now, Joseph is the son of Jacob. He's the son of Jacob. So it represents one of the 12 tribes, right? And Joseph was the favorite of Jacob, so much so that he gave Jacob a coat of many colors, a special garment, as it were. And he made the brothers very, what's the word? Mad, because Jacob would always play favorites with him, right? So the brothers were very aggravated with him to the point where they decided they wanted to kill him. So they took him out and didn't kill him. What'd they do instead? They sold him to slavery, right? But what did they tell their dad? That he was dead, right? How did they do that? Does anyone remember that part of the story? They would slaughter the lamb and then take the blood of the lamb, and he took his coat and dipped it in the blood of that lamb. And blood has a very salty taste, right? If you enjoy drinking blood, you know what I mean, right? That's great. Anyways, and then that is the story and why we dip the karpas. So go ahead. We're going to dip the karpas in our nice salt water because it's bitter. And go ahead. That is not tasty at all. Okay. So, and we really want to take a drink, but don't drink out of the white one. That will just make it worse. Okay. So, after that, this is usually a time when the little kids would start to get really anxious and like, well, okay, I don't understand what we're doing. So some little kid would start off by asking a question. So we have little kids in the audience that are going to ask us some questions.
What makes it better from wrong rice?
Why do we eat only unleavened bread tonight?
Why do we eat bitter herbs? Why do we dip the vegetables? Why are we even doing this?
So good questions. Those are great questions. I love it. Okay, so at this point, the father or head of the table, so this would have been probably, like Jesus would have probably told this story because he would have been the head of the table at that particular moment. And he would use this time to answer all of those questions by giving a history of the Israelite people. Now, the Seder meal would usually take 2, maybe 3 hours, something like that. We are not going to do that. So I am going to give a very brief answer to your question and just say, they would answer by saying, our ancestor Abraham was called by Yahweh to Canaan, but then Canaan had a famine. Obviously, we've skipped a bunch of years. Canaan had a famine, and then they had to go to Egypt in order to survive said famine. But once they got to Egypt, they grew in numbers and grew in prosperity to the point where it made the Egyptians very nervous. Because they were worried that if some other enemy would come to Egypt, maybe they would talk the Israelites into coming up and rising up against the Egyptians as well. So, to stop that from happening to begin with, they started to put the Israelites into more of like a slavery type relationship. They had one Pharaoh that really liked them. They went to the next Pharaoh, and that one was like, I don't like these people. So, he put them into slavery. He would write decrees that actually would say, kill their firstborn. Which is where that came from, by the way. Kill their firstborn, make them have slavery, make them have all these oppressive things. But then Moses came and rescued us and redeemed us out of the tyranny of Egypt and brought us into the promised land. And that is why we eat and drink and do all of these things that you all so graciously asked. And thank you for participating in all of that. So, to end that particular story, they would then sing out of the Psalms, Psalm 113 to be specific. I am not going to sing in Hebrew. You are welcome. But Nate, if you'd like to come up and grab the mic, you're welcome to. So what we're going to do is we're just going to read out of Psalm 113. Can we do that together? Great. Okay, is it already up there? Great. All right, let's all read this together. Blessed be the name of the Lord from this time forth and forevermore. From the rising of the sun to its setting, the name of the Lord is to be praised. The Lord is high above all nations, and his glory above the heavens. All right. So, let's go ahead and do our second blessing of the cup. So go ahead and raise. We can finally get the salt out of our mouths. Okay, ready? So, may you be blessed, Lord our God, King of the world, who brings forth the fruit of the vine. Very well done. Very well done. Okay, so the next part of the meal, we would start with the bread. Now, again, because I'm just grabbing stuff out of my cabinet. That's what I'm doing, right? So these are tortilla shells, but they're flat and they're bread-like. So we're just going to play pretend. Okay, so why do you think we would eat bread that has no leaven in it, or a flat bread like that, right? That's what someone would ask.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Close enough. All right, so why would we eat bread with no leaven in it? Happy you asked. So the reason for this, and the reason why they have unleavened bread instead of regular bread, because I don't know if you've ever actually made bread before, but it takes a long time for it to rise, right? At least 24 hours. I think I've seen Sarah rise it for longer, but at least 24 hours to rise bread. I don't know how much it takes to make bread. All I know is bread just appears in our house, and she makes it. So anyways, the reason why they eat unleavened bread is because they had no time. Whenever Moses came and got them out of Egypt, it was like that. It was really quick. They had zero time to prepare. So they had just dough balls that they could just kind of make on the road that wouldn't rise or anything like that. So therefore, they would just have unleavened bread. So let's go ahead actually and read that. So that's in Exodus 12:39 is the small little story about this. Let's read this. And they baked unleavened cakes of the dough that they had brought out of Egypt, for it was not leavened, because they were thrust out of Egypt and could not wait. They had prepared any provision, nor had they prepared any provisions for themselves. Shadow, couldn't read, sorry. So what this meant was, like I said, they were in a hurry. So they didn't have time to have their bread rise. So again, every part of this meal is to point back to something that had happened. So they always remember. It gives them an excuse to tell the story and to bring part of the narrative. Okay? But Jesus, in Luke 22, he changes it. He changes it. Let's read that. Luke 22, verse 19. And he took the bread, and when he had given thanks, he broke it and gave it to them, saying, "This is my body, which is given for you. Do this in remembrance of me." Of me. Not escaping Egypt, not having time to raise your bread, but me. So he took the bread, he broke it, he would give it, which I have already given you guys bread, all right? He said, "Do this in remembrance of me." Because originally, when they were escaping Egypt, they were escaping death. They were escaping slavery. And they were redeemed out of that. And Jesus is saying that my body is broken for you to escape death and to be redeemed. Okay. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. This next part is going to be unpleasant. And I apologize. So the next part is taking of the bitter herb. Now you might say, I thought we did that already. Wasn't that the salt? No, it was not the salt. That is not what that was. So I don't know if you've ever had horseradish before. Yeah, there's no way around this, guys. This isn't going to be fun. But it's supposed to not be fun. That's the whole point, right? Is that it's supposed to be bitter. It's supposed to be uncomfortable. Why is it supposed to be bitter? And why is it supposed to be uncomfortable, you ask? Exodus 1, verses 11 through 12. Let's read that. I'll move this out of the shadow so I can read it. But the more they were oppressed, who's they? Israelites. The more they were oppressed, the more they multiplied, and the more they spread abroad. And the Egyptians were in dread of the people of Israel. So they ruthlessly made the people of Israel work as slaves and made their lives bitter with hard service. So, as you can imagine, working for the Egyptians, being worked to death like that was rather unpleasant and rather bitter. And that's what this is supposed to remind us of, is how unpleasant and how bitter that was. So, you don't have a heart condition, do you? Okay, good. You You do today? Okay. So, remembering how our people suffered under the Egyptian rule, we take of the bitter herb. Good luck. Okay. Oh, that's not too bad.
Pretty good.
Yeah, it's not good. Are you okay? You gonna make it? So good? Okay, all right. See, we handled that fine. Do we need to do it again, just to make sure?
I mean, at this point.
Appreciate it. Appreciate you being here. Okay, so then after that, we take the bitter herb. Then they would take of the lamb. Now, obviously, as I explained before, we don't have lamb. We have plastic kid food. Don't eat it. So just don't eat it. But, so they would pick it up and they would break apart and serve the lamb. And then the story of how the lamb's blood was used to be put on the doors would be told. They would slaughter the lamb. But they would make sure they would tell the whole story, which began with the lamb becoming a friend, becoming part of the family. And they would bring it into their home. Pardon me. They would bring it into their home, and they would literally build a bond and a relationship with this lamb. Cute little lamb. I mean, it was perfect. It was beautiful. Is this helping? Okay. Anyway, and they would build this relationship with this lamb, and the whole point of it was to get attached. And then, night of, they would slaughter the lamb, and they would keep the blood from the slaughter. And that's, like I said, the night of, that's what they would do. And they take that blood and they paint it over the doors so that way they could be rescued from death. So we would partake of the lamb to remember how God rescued us in that way. And then then lastly, we would take the final cup. And again, Jesus changes the script. Let's go ahead and read Luke 22, verse 20. And likewise the cup, after they had eaten it, saying, "This cup is poured out for you. It is the new covenant in my blood." May you be blessed, Lord God, King of the universe, who brings forth the fruit of the vine. So the new covenant in his blood is not talking about how the lamb was slaughtered and put over doors so they would be passed over from death. Instead, we're talking about the blood that was spilled and his death for us, so that we can be passed over because of our sin and because of our brokenness and because of all the ways that we can't save ourselves. It had to be, God had to come himself to save us. He had to spill his blood. He had to be tortured. He had to be the one to sacrifice. And that is why we partake in the Passover meal. Now, let's hear it for our volunteers. All right. Appreciate it, guys. Thank you for coming. All right. And we can come up and finish the juice later if you'd like. So this is how Jesus flips the script. This is no longer a meal about how the Israelites were rescued from Egypt. No, instead, it is no longer exclusive in that way, but it's actually inclusive for all of us that choose to believe. For all of us that choose to believe that Christ is King, Christ is Lord, Christ is God. That he came and died on a Roman torture device, spilling his blood, breaking his body, so that way you can be saved and redeemed from your sin. Amen. That's why we do this. Now, we may not do this every time, but we're still brought into the narrative. I'm not going to just sit here and read the story to you. No, here in a little bit, we're all going to partake in the Lord's Supper. Because that's how theater works. It brings you into the story. Makes you part of it. So that way you remember not just, this juice isn't great, right? No, you remember this is Christ's blood, a new covenant. This is Christ's body that was broken for you. We do this in remembrance of him. Now, in general, like I said, we don't have too many patterns, except for maybe, this. But even then, it's, sparing, I guess you could say, sometimes. So maybe something for us to think about as the ushers come, preparing for the Lord's Supper, and then the band comes back up as well. Something for us to think about. We're partaking in a ritual today, absolutely, to remember. But what do you do with your family? What do you do with your spouse to keep God at the center of your life? Always remembering what he has done. Always remembering how he is active in your life. Maybe that's something as simple as, well, I wake up every morning and I pray with my wife. And we pray every morning. And that's our ritual. That's how we do it. Or at night, right before we go to bed. Or maybe you actually do this. Every year you have your own Passover or Seder meal. How are you bringing the rhythm, the pattern, the rituals that God would have you do to remember him? I'm not saying we need to necessarily bring back all the festivals and everything, but I think it's pretty important that he made that clear. I want you to remember me. I want to be part of your life. So as we walk away today, as we're partaking in the Lord's Supper this morning, I think we pray about that. How do we insert God more into that? How do we remind our kids who he is? Remind our grandkids who he is? How do we do this life in remembrance of him? So as the band plays, we'll come forth, we'll take the elements, and then we'll pray, and we'll partake in the Lord's Supper together.